Alright, episode 91, and we are going to be talking about an odd creature from Southeast Asia yet again. Of course, we're going to be talking about the Malaysian tapir. Now, we've discussed tapirs before in the Baird's tapir video, but it's a video I consider being made in the dark times. A point when I didn't know what I was doing, was only talking to a microphone with no script, and not really a bullet point list of things I actually wanted to speak about, so it was far too long for far too little information. Hopefully today, this can be considered my tapir reprise. So, known scientifically as Tapirs indicus, I'll let you put the pieces together there, they are the largest of all extant tapir species and the only one found outside of the Americas. The average Malaysian tapir weighs roughly 550 to 710 pounds, but is capable of maxing out at 1,060 pounds. This mass makes it one of the safest animals against predators in Southeast Asia. With its size, even tigers will often attempt to find an easier target before trying their hand, or paw, at this half-ton slab of muscle with a bite like this. God, look at those teeth. And that chomp is no joke, as a zookeeper back in the 90s in Oklahoma had lost an arm to a Malaysian tapir after it clamped onto her bicep. Unfortunately, its bite was able to crush her bone, and its teeth were capable of tearing through the muscle. So, unfortunately, she now has to live the rest of her life with only one. But, as long as you keep a safe distance and stay out of places like Sumatra, Peninsular Malaysia, Thailand, and the southernmost parts of Myanmar. Granted, you should stay out of Myanmar at this point either way, but as long as you don't get too close in those areas, you won't need to worry about that happening to you. And even if you are, they're pretty solitary creatures that wouldn't want to be around civilization to begin with. While this event isn't their claim to fame, and they're most likely more famous just for the bold black and white color pattern and their influence on modern culture, we need to first check out where this animal comes from, as we always do. The common understanding of where the tapir evolved is actually in Europe, roughly 15 million years ago, though the oldest species that was actually named, called Tapirs, Tapirs. Boy, they were clever that time, weren't they? Was found in South Dakota. So I'm going to assume they just found tapir bones of a species they couldn't identify yet in Europe. The last living species of the European tapir was known as Tapirs arvanensis, which is the one that extended all throughout Asia as well. These guys are most likely the closest known relatives to our Malaysian friend, and they went extinct roughly 2.6 million years ago. Unfortunately, any other historical evidence are unknown due to the lack of fossil evidence. So, what about their interpersonal human side-by-side history, aka culture? I don't know what I was saying there. Well, the people of Southeast Asia had actually held the animal in pretty high regard, usually being seen as a nature spirit. It wasn't very common for them to actually be hunted, and interestingly enough, this faux pas tradition has continued into the modern day, but for a different spirituality. You see, while most of the Western world thinks of Islam and immediately jumps to places like the Middle East and North Africa, or Michigan, Malaysia is also a primarily Muslim nation, and while tapirs are seen as halal, they are not a preferred meat, as they're kind of in the in-between of, sort of like if someone gave you a dish that consisted of something like raccoon. You might be a little weary about it, but morally speaking, it's not like it's a dog or a cat, so maybe you'll try it. However, interestingly enough, going down this rabbit hole of what is and is not culturally acceptable to eat, I had found that tapirs are not kosher. And I never really thought about what kosher even meant, so I went down this rabbit hole, and if I had to learn, so do you, because that's the whole point of me making these videos, is to educate you. Even if it's completely useless education, or completely unrelated to the subject. So anyway, there are two things that an animal needs to contain to make it kosher. First is to have cloven hooves. So, they can't have a singular hoof. Animals that we all know today, cows, deer, antelope, stuff like that, those are all fine. Goats as well. And number two, the animal needs to chew its own cud. Cud being regurgitated food to essentially chew it a secondary time that many grazing animals will do. And this is where the tapir fails. Now, does this affect the cultural influence of the animal? No. As a matter of fact, Judaism is not very prevalent anywhere the tapir of any species is. But like I said, I read it, now you need to know it. You're welcome. But, for most of us in the West, we may have been introduced to the tapir through Pokemon. With Drowsy, if you're older like me, or Muna and Musharna, if, you're a little bit younger. And this influence actually has to do with its connection to a legendary Japanese yokai known as the Baku. The Baku is known to put people to sleep and use their sleep to consume dreams and to thwart nightmares, which you can see in these Pokedex entries for both those species in Pokemon, both based on the tapir. Now, there is one very important question I have. How do the Japanese have mythology for an animal that not only is not native to their island, but by the time they would actually get to those locations through conquest or what have you, probably wouldn't be until the 20th century. Think about it. Japan, for the longest time, had isolated themselves for a couple hundred years before even becoming a fully unified nation. How did they learn about the tapir? Because their biggest military rival guards them from the coastline, right? It's just interesting. I never saw anywhere where they were introduced to Japanese culture, and that is something that if you know more about, I very much, and I do mean very much, plead with you to share in the comments, because I would love to know the answer to that. And with that all said and done, that's what I got. So, thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please leave a like, share, and subscribe. And until next time, go outside, touch grass, hug your loved ones, drink water, and bye-bye.